There were days when Carria 9 looked almost like Earth, if Earth had ever been wrapped in ribbons of lavender mist and its trees grew upside down, rooting into the sky and dangling crystalline leaves like chandelier teeth. Elliot Vance never stopped to admire it. He had a habit of walking with his head down, eyes on the ground, boots crunching through soil that looked like powdered charcoal and smelled faintly of ozone and oranges. He was a maintenance tech, a job he liked precisely because it required minimal eye contact, maximum solitude, and a good excuse to carry a wrench longer than his forearm. He was on his second caffeine patch of the morning and wrestling with a faulty irrigation sensor when he first saw her. At first, he thought she was another illusion from the atmosphere. Carria's light played tricks, stretching shadows and shimmering heat into vaguely humanoid forms, but this one didn't vanish. She stood near the whisper grass, her body still as if she were carved from the same stone the colonists used to build the central hub. Her skin had a translucent quality like light passed through honey, and her hair fell in silver cords that fluttered without wind. Most striking of all were her ears, long, gently pointed, rising slightly behind her crown like elegant antennae, not prosthetics, not genetic modification, the real thing. Elliot blinked, then blinked again, slower this time, just to be sure he hadn't accidentally slapped on a hallucinogenic dermal patch instead of his caffeine. The Evelyn woman turned her head toward him. Crap, it was one thing to spot an alien rare but not unheard of. It was another thing to be caught gawking like an idiot with dirt under your fingernails and a bag of loose coupling joints hanging off your belt. Elliot said intelligently. The Evelyn tilted her head, her eyes were immense and silver blue, reflecting the fractured sunlight like twin moons. Okay, don't panic, just be normal. What would a normal person do? Elliot glanced down. A small flower grew near his boot, a curl of violet petals cupped around a bioluminescent center like someone had miniaturized a firework and taught it to be bashful. In the kind of move one makes only when the logical part of the brain has been temporarily replaced by scrambled eggs, Elliot reached down, plucked the flower, and held it out. For you, he said, his voice cracked at the end, making it sound less like an offering and more like a question asked by a man who wasn't confident he existed anymore. The Evelyn stared at the flower, then at him, then back at the flower. Elliot held it out a little further, his arm trembling from the weight of his own awkwardness. She stepped forward slowly, reverently, as if she were approaching a relic, not a nervous technician who'd skipped breakfast and regretted all his life choices. Her hands cupped around his, not quite touching the flower, just framing it. A sound escaped her, a soft exhale like the wind catching a chime. Elliot dared to glance upward. Her face was alight, not just with expression but with something deeper, something glowing from inside her skin like starlight beneath skin-thin glass. He cleared his throat. It's just a flower, weeds really. These things grow like, well, weeds. She smiled then, a slow seismic smile that felt like it shifted the axis of reality just slightly, and then she turned and walked away, flower in hand, disappearing into the tall grass without a word. Elliot stood there for a good minute longer, wondering if this was the part where he got abducted or offered a job at a cosmic florist. He went back to his repair work, fingers fumbling over wires, brain attempting to reset. By the time he returned to the main colony dome, the flower incident had nestled into the back of his mind as a curious footnote to an otherwise boring day. That is, until the next morning. He was halfway through installing a pressure gauge when a shadow fell over his work. He looked up and then up further. The Evelyn woman was back. She stood beside a cluster of others, tall, silent, similarly long-eared, their garments a cascade of reflective layers that shimmered between blues and greens. One of them held a folded cloak of pale gold, another held a scroll. Elliot blinked, hi again. The woman, same silver hair, same eyes like melted mirrors, stepped forward and unrolled the scroll. She read aloud, her voice melodic but firm, speaking in a mix of Evelyn and accented galactic standard. To the one who has offered bloom and thus opened the path of joining, we bring honor, witness, and sacred cloth. Let it be known that the offering has been accepted. Let it be known that bonding has begun. Elliot opened his mouth, closed it, then managed, sorry, the what now? Lyra, he would learn her name later, though it rolled through the group like a murmur of wind through tall reeds, smiled again and draped the gold cloak over his shoulders. It glowed. Of course it glowed. Behind her, one of the Evelyn gave a small approving clap, another wept openly as though this moment had fulfilled some ancient space prophecy. Elliot stood there, cloak shimmering, scrolls still floating in front of him like it was waiting to be notarized, and wondered if this was punishment for the time he'd accidentally microwaved his supervisor's burrito. By noon, the news had reached Central Command. By evening, he'd been pulled into a meeting with a diplomat whose eyebrows were permanently stuck in a state of arch concern. "You gave her a flower, Elliot," the diplomat said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Yeah," Elliot replied, "a flower, you know, a gesture, friendly, peaceful, not, I didn't realize it was like a marriage proposal or a spiritual awakening or whatever this is turning into." The diplomat sighed. In Evelyn culture, flowers are sacred, rare, their natural habitat was decimated centuries ago. To give a flower is to give part of your essence. It is a declaration of trust. "Well, can I declare a retraction?" It turned out no, you could not. Not without causing deep offense and potentially igniting a diplomatic incident. So Elliot went home, poured himself a fizzy green drink that tasted like burnt mint, and sat on his bunk staring at the cloak draped over his chair. It pulsed faintly with warmth like a heartbeat. "I gave a flower," he said aloud. "Next thing I know I'm bonded. That escalated faster than my student debt." Outside, beyond the walls of the colony dome, the whisper grass rustled. Something was changing, and somewhere not far, Lyra stood with the flower cradled in her hands, gazing at it as if it held the weight of the stars. Elliot Vance awoke the next morning to find the golden cloak had slithered off the back of his chair and curled itself around his legs like a particularly needy cat. He stared at it for a long moment, uncertain if he should be flattered or alarmed. The cloak pulsed once, a subtle ripple of warmth and light, as if it were trying to say, "Good morning, Elliot, your existential crisis awaits." Dragging it off like an old blanket with delusions of grandeur, he tossed it into the laundry chute and muttered, "Look, I barely have room in my life for clingy clothing, let alone interspecies engagement rituals." His room beeped loudly. The console on the wall flickered to life, displaying a message, "Lyra of the Evelyn awaits you at Dome Gate 7. Below it, a small smiley face rotated in a loop as if cheerfully mocking his fate. Still half asleep and wholly confused, Elliot pulled on his work boots, rubbed at the caffeine patch already fused to his neck, and staggered out the door. Carrionine's air had a sharpness to it that didn't quite burn but always smelled like the moment before lightning. The sky was a pale violet streak with horizontal clouds that moved in straight lines, a phenomenon that never got less weird no matter how many times he'd seen it. Trees rooted in the sky above swayed lazily, dangling their leafy veils like upside-down chandeliers. Gate 7 wasn't far, just past the hydroponic fields where a group of colonists in coveralls were arguing about whether the new batch of moss fruit was hallucinating again. One of them waved at Elliot. "Hey, Bond guy, don't float off into the ether, yeah." "Huh, hilarious," Elliot called back. "I'll save you a seat at the next spiritual awakening." When he arrived, Lyra was waiting alone, tall, serene, and terrifyingly poised. Her silver hair was braided back today, revealing the full sweep of her long ears, which twitched slightly at his approach. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, and Elliot's brain, traitorous and unhelpful, decided to replay that smile from yesterday in high definition. "You came," she said, as if it were a miracle on par with time travel or discovering good cafeteria food. "Well, you sent a message." It had a smiley face, kind of hard to ignore. "I chose the symbol myself," she said proudly. "I have studied Earth expressions. It means joy without sarcasm." Elliot blinked. "That's surprisingly accurate, well done." She beamed. "I also discovered the gesture of thumbs up. It is your species' method of giving encouragement. Observe." She raised both hands and gave two over-exaggerated thumbs up with the gravity of someone performing an ancient rite. Elliot tried not to laugh. "Yep, that's it, flawless. I practiced in the mirror. I can tell." She stepped closer and her expression softened. "Would you walk with me? I'm not about to be ritually sacrificed, am I?" She tilted her head. "Would it comfort you to be?" No. Then no. That wasn't exactly the most reassuring exchange Elliot had ever had, but Lyra's presence was oddly calming as they walked together through the outer colony paths. The whisper grass around them bent in waves, reacting to her proximity. Evelyn biology, he remembered reading somewhere, was subtly psionic, connected to energy fields and emotional resonance. So, he said after a few minutes of silence, this whole bonding thing, can we talk about it? She nodded solemn, of course, I have prepared a syllabus. You what? She stopped and pulled a small data crystal from a pouch at her waist, inserting it into her bracelet. A holographic interface appeared listing a detailed breakdown, emotional resonance and the bonded path, cross-species trust frameworks, flower symbolism in Evelyn history from myth to memory. Elliot stared at it. Okay, that's thorough. I believed it would aid your understanding. I mean, it definitely beats the pamphlet I got when I started dadding Dela back on Earth. It mostly said, don't be a jerk. Was that effective? Not really, we broke up because I ate her lunch by accident. Lyra nodded with great seriousness. Food is sacred. Tell me about it. They continued walking, passing into a grove of translucent flora that chimed when the wind brushed them. Lyra touched one gently. The note it emitted was soft, like a lullaby on the edge of memory. I felt your gesture, she said after a while. The flower, it was pure, uncalculated, that is why it mattered. But I didn't mean it to mean anything, Elliot said, kicking a rock that floated for a second before gently plopping back to the ground. Intentions matter, but to us so does resonance. Meaning arises not from thought alone but from feeling, you offered without expecting. Honestly, I expected you to be weirded out. I was delighted I danced that night. Elliot's mind conjured the image of Lyra, elegant, luminous, doing some kind of alien jig in a field under moonlight, and immediately had to suppress laughter. I wish I'd seen that. I will show you someday. There was a pause, the kind that stretched just long enough to invite meaning into it. Then, mercifully, Lyra pointed up at a passing drone and said, "Why do your maintenance machines sound like flatulence?" Elliot snorted, "That one's broken, has been for a year, it's a colony tradition now." Tradition? Yeah, every time someone walks past it, they salute it and say, "May your air remain pure." Lyra stared at him, then with perfect solemnity, she saluted the fart drone and intoned, "May your air remain pure." And just like that, the tension dissolved. Elliot laughed, Lyra's eyes sparkled, ears twitching with delight. They returned to the colony dome as evening settled, a shimmering dusk that turned the air a soft indigo. Before parting, Lyra held out a small stone carved into a spiral, glowing faintly. "For you," she said, "to mark the second day of our resonance." Elliot took it, the stone warm in his palm. What happens on the third day? You will see. He watched her walk away, cloak brushing the whisper grass, her presence like a note that lingered after the music stopped. Back in his quarters, Elliot placed the spiral stone next to the cloak which had returned from the laundry chute on its own and sat down heavily. Day 2, he said aloud, glancing between the two artifacts. I'm bonding, I'm resonating, I'm saluting fart drones. He paused. I'm doomed, aren't I? The cloak pulsed once in agreement. The third day began with a knock. That in itself was unusual. Doors on Carrier 9 rarely got used for their original function. They mostly opened with biometric scans, polite chimes, or the occasional malfunctioning AI that shouted authorized user like an overzealous bouncer. But today there was a knock. Soft, rhythmic, unmistakably old-fashioned. Elliot Vance groaned, rolled over, and cracked one eye open. The spiral stone on his nightstand was glowing faintly again, pulsing to some inaudible rhythm. Beside it, the golden cloak had somehow migrated from its carefully folded place to nestle against his feet like a golden retriever with boundary issues. Another knock. All right, I'm coming. Don't vaporize the door," Elliot muttered, hauling himself out of bed. He hit the wall panel and the door slid open with a hiss. Lyra stood on the other side. Today she wore a deep sapphire wrap that shimmered with microfilament threads, making her look like she'd been stitched from twilight. In one hand she held a steaming mug, in the other a bundle of pale, fuzzy sticks that Elliot quickly identified as some kind of breakfast root that tasted suspiciously like warm carrots in despair. "I brought sustenance," she said solemnly. "You brought the mushiks of doom, how kind." They are traditional morning fare for the path of joining, full of vitamins and existential dread. She handed him the mug. It was rich, dark, and smelled like someone had convinced a black hole to taste good. Elliot took a sip and blinked. "Okay, this is incredible. What is this?" "We call it thorale. The seeds are fermented beneath moonlight and blessed with harmonic vibration." Elliot squinted at the mug. "You mean it's moon-creamed espresso?" Lyra tilted her head. "Yes." "Fantastic, I can feel my soul buzzing." He took another sip, then gestured for her to come in. Lyra stepped over the threshold like she was entering sacred ground, her long ears twitching faintly as she surveyed the room, the cluttered shelves, the dented helmet. With a post-it that read, "Do not trust this, explodes," the dried moss fruit he'd forgotten to throw out last week, she took it all in with polite curiosity. "You live simply," she said. "It's either that or let the maintenance bots redecorate. Last time they tried, I ended up with a neon waterfall and something that may have been an indoor sandstorm." "Minimalism is sacred in some Evelyn sects," she added, running her fingers lightly over his shelf. "There is honor in objects that serve purpose." Elliot shrugged. "Well then, I'm deeply spiritual, just don't ask me to give up my 3-in-1 wrench, it's got history." He chewed one of the root sticks reluctantly. It was less awful than usual. Either Lyra had brought the high-end stuff or the theory was rewiring his taste buds. "So," he said around a mouthful of sacred root, "what happens today? More bonding, a quiz, spiritual cartwheels." She smiled. "Today we leave the colony." Elliot blinked. "Oh cool, that's not terrifying at all." "You will be safe, I have arranged an escort." Sure enough, when they exited the dome, a small skimmer waited nearby, sleek, iridescent, and hovering a few inches off the ground. It wasn't human tech, the edges curved like liquid, and it purred like a contented panther. Two Evelyns stood beside it, one tall and grave, the other shorter and inexplicably wearing goggles that kept slipping down their nose. "We journey to the Grove of Echoes," Lyra explained as they climbed aboard. "It is an ancient place resonant with memory. It is custom for those newly joined to visit and listen." "Do I need to do anything specific?" Elliot asked. "Mostly listen." "Great, I'm a professional listener. Once got through an entire staff meeting by just nodding and making thoughtful noises." The skimmer lifted, and the world fell away beneath them as they glided above the whisper grass plains. Elliot couldn't help but stare. The landscape was otherworldly, canyons carved in spirals, floating moats of bioluminescent pollen, tree-like structures that sprouted from nothing and shimmered as if painted by light. It was like flying through a dream built by someone who'd read too much cosmic poetry. The journey took less than an hour. They descended into a clearing where the air itself seemed thicker, slower. The Grove of Echoes was aptly named. Tall structures, part rock, part crystal, curved upward around them like frozen waves. The wind whispered in harmonic tones, each footstep echoed strangely like it had its own memory. Lyra led him to the center. "Place your hands here," she said, gesturing to a polished surface at the base of the tallest crystal. Elliot did. The surface was cool, then suddenly warm, like it recognized him. A low hum began, soft, resonant, filled with wordless meaning. He wasn't hearing it exactly, but feeling it deep in his bones. Then came the voices, not loud, not distinct, just threads of sound, emotion, flickers of thought. Lyra stood beside him, eyes closed, long ears twitching as if catching melodies he couldn't quite hear. "Is it supposed to be this weird?" he whispered. "It is memory," she replied. "The grove keeps echoes of those who come here. It senses your resonance and offers fragments that align." Elliot frowned. "Fragments of me, or what I might become." One voice cut through suddenly, his own, but younger, uncertain, laughing nervously as he asked a girl named Dela if she wanted to share lunch. Another followed, his mother's voice reading to him from a book about stars. Then something alien but familiar, Lyra maybe, not in words but in essence, a warmth, a kind of shimmering presence that wrapped around his thoughts like silk. He pulled back, shaking. That was a lot. The grove is not meant to be easy, Lyra said softly, but it brings clarity. Elliot sat down on a nearby stone, exhaling slowly. I felt things, stuff I forgot, stuff I didn't know I missed. You are not alone. They sat in silence for a while, the wind threading between the crystals, humming with echoes. Then Lyra added, one time the grove showed me a vision of myself tripping over a root and falling into a mud pit. It said, this is how you learned grace. Elliot barked a laugh. Well, that's comforting. Maybe next time it'll show me flunking my bot repair certification. I hope so, it will mean you are becoming wise. They returned in the skimmer as night fell, stars rising in slow constellations. When they reached the dome, Lyra walked him to his quarters. She handed him a small silver orb. This is yours now, it will remember what the grove showed you in case you need reminding. Elliot turned it over in his hands. Does it play the embarrassing stuff too? Especially the embarrassing stuff. He grinned, good, keeps me humble. As Lyra turned to leave, he called out, hey, thanks for all of this. She paused, looking back with a warmth in her eyes that made his chest ache in strange, unfamiliar ways. You are welcome, Elliot Vance, may your air remain pure. She gave him a thumbs up and disappeared into the corridor. Inside, Elliot stared at the orb, the stone, the cloak now folded neatly again, all glowing softly in the dim light. He sighed. I gave a flower, he muttered. The orb pulsed gently, as if laughing with him. By the fourth day, Elliot Vance had reached the inevitable stage of any interspecies relationship, deep existential confusion and the uncomfortable realization that his socks were judging him. They were lopsided in the drawer, all different colors. One even had a cartoon space whale on it, and for some reason they now felt symbolic. He suspected Lyra was behind it, not directly of course, but ever since she'd given him the Grove memory orb and started saying things like you are evolving with a straight face, everything had started feeling profound. Even his laundry. The orb currently hovered midair above his desk, spinning slowly and humming a gentle tune that sounded suspiciously like it was mocking him. You're not sentient, right? He asked it. The orb pulsed in a way that could be interpreted as smug. Elliot sighed and pulled on his boots. Outside, the colony dome shimmered under the twin suns, one a fierce white disk, the other a dull red smoldering behind high-altitude clouds. The combination gave everything a kind of diffused painterly glow, like the world was wrapped in a mood filter. Colonists bustled around on their morning routines, hydrobotanists examined the trembling radish pods, an engineer argued with a vending drone over its definition of coffee, and someone in a vacuum suit was riding a wheeled crate down the corridor shouting for science. Elliot saluted them as he passed, brave souls. Lyra was waiting by the water echo fountain near the east gate, her cloak today the color of clouded moonlight, her long ears flicked in greeting, and she smiled the way she always did now, like she was seeing something deeper than his face. You slept well, she asked. Define well, Elliot said. I dreamt I was in a cooking competition and the judges were talking flowers with laser eyes. That is a good sign, she said cheerfully. Your subconscious is adjusting. To what exactly? She held out a hand. Come, today you meet the minds. Elliot blinked. The minds, as in plural, capital M. Yes, they are the sentient intelligences that dwell beneath the surface. They guide the balance of Caria. He stared at her. You're telling me this planet has a brain? Multiple brains. They are not brains, they are symphonic neural clouds, very polite. He ran a hand through his hair. Of course they are. The journey to the subsurface enclave required taking a lift that descended so far into the ground it passed through 6 separate climate layers. one of which included glowing amphibians and a mushroom that tried to sell Elliot real estate. By the time they reached the final level, his boots were dusted in luminescent spores, and he was beginning to doubt reality's commitment to staying normal. The Chamber of the Mines was unexpected. Elliot had anticipated something sterile and intimidating, gleaming metal, blinking lights, ominous whispering in binary. Instead, it resembled a concert hall designed by an architect who'd lost a bet with a jellyfish. Organic structures pulsed with slow bioluminescence, and long strands of fiber reached down like vines, twinning into pools of reflective liquid. Lyra guided him to a central platform. "Stand here, they will address you soon." He stepped up, glancing nervously at the nearest vine. "And if I say the wrong thing? They will offer constructive feedback or a haiku." "Wait, are they poetic?" "Very, it is how they process ambiguity." Before he could respond, the air changed. The temperature dropped slightly, the pools of liquid began to ripple, and the vines shifted, humming in soft harmony. A deep voice, not spoken but vibrated directly into Elliot's thoughts, filled the chamber. "ELLIOTVANC, human, giver of bloom." He winced. "Yep, that's me, flower guy." "You have initiated resonance." The THREADS converge. "Oh, fantastic, that sounds deeply mysterious and hard to undo." A second voice joined in, lighter, warmer. "He jokes, he masks uncertainty with mirth, a good sign." A third chimed in with a whisper laugh. "Let us ask him the question." Elliot glanced at Lyra, who gave him a tiny shrug. "Good luck." The first voice returned. "ELLIOTVANCE, would you like SNACKS?" There was a long pause. Elliot blinked. What?" Lyra cleared her throat delicately. "They offer sustenance to those they are considering for deeper resonance." "Right, snacks, of course." A small platform extended from the floor, revealing an assortment of delicacies, some floating, some humming softly, one that winked at him. He pointed. "That one just blinked. It contains mild telepathy, enhances flavor perception." "You folks don't do anything halfway, do you?" Elliot selected something that looked like a candied coral and took a bite. It tasted like childhood and unexpected jazz. The minds hummed in unison. "He is receptive, humor integrated, emotional profile elastic, trust potential variable but rising." Lyra stepped forward, voice steady. "He is still adapting, but he sees." Elliot chewed slowly, then nodded. "I may not understand all of this, but I'm trying. I didn't give the flower expecting anything. I just liked her, the moment." A fourth voice, quiet and deep, whispered through the chamber. "That is the true offering." The lights dimmed, then brightened gently. The THREADS continue. "He may proceed." The vines relaxed, curling back into their pools. The food platform receded. Lyra turned to him. "They like you." "I got psychic snacks and a compliment, I'll take it." As they rose back toward the surface, Elliot leaned against the wall of the lift and exhaled. "So what happens now?" "You have passed the mind's evaluation. You are officially recognized as a participant in the resonance path." "That sounds ominous. Is there a certificate?" "There is a song and a celebratory stew." "Of course there is." She smiled. "Also, your cloak will now obey you fully." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "Wait, it wasn't before." "It was testing your worthiness. I knew that smug little sheet was up to something." By the time they returned to the colony, dusk was falling again. The sky blushed with 3 shades of orange, and distant lightning flickered along the horizon like silent applause. At his door, Lyra paused. "You have done well today." Elliot smiled. "Thanks for not letting the mines eat me." "They do not eat, usually." He laughed, and she stepped forward, brushing a hand against his chest, just briefly. It was a touch full of meaning, one he didn't entirely understand but felt in his bones. Then she turned, walking into the twilight, her silhouette trailing moonlight. Inside, Elliot sank into his chair, staring at the orb now glowing more brightly than ever. His cloak draped itself neatly around his shoulders, humming a soft tune that might have been pride. Day 4, he murmured, spiritual jellyfish, psychic hors d'oeuvres, and I think I'm bonding with a cloak. The orb pulsed twice. He smiled, yeah, I'm starting to get it. On the 5th morning, Elliot Vance awoke to find a ceremonial beetle sitting on his forehead. This wasn't apparently cause for alarm. The beetle, roughly the size of a fist, polished like obsidian and covered in faint bioluminescent runes, blinked its eyes, 3 of them, let out a polite chirp, and then with great dignity leapt off his face and scuttled toward the door where it promptly phased through the wall. Elliot sat up and blinked after it, muttering, right, just another Tuesday. The orb on his shelf pulsed with a serene blue, and his cloak, now fully loyal or at least only mildly mischievous, wrapped itself helpfully around his shoulders with a dramatic flourish. Thanks, Elliot muttered. At least someone in this room respects gravity. Outside, the dome was unusually quiet. A fine golden mist had settled over the colony grounds, softening the angles of the structures and muffling sound like an auditory blanket. Distant shapes moved, tall Evelyn in ceremonial garb, some floating an inch above the soil. Others carrying crystalline instruments shaped like tuning forks had collided with violins in a tragic but artistic accident. Lyra met him near the eastern fountain again. Today her eyes seemed brighter, her long ears more alert. She wore a wrap of silver and teal, and her arms were bare except for 3 gleaming bands of metal that shimmered with shifting script. You are summoned, she said simply, as though being summoned by unknown alien authorities was just a fun errand to run before lunch. Summoned, you make it sound so official. It is, today is the bloom ceremony. Elliot stopped walking. Wait, that's a real thing, that's not just what I called that awkward moment when I gave you a flower. Lyra blinked once. You initiated it, the gesture marked the first resonance. The ceremony is the formal recognition of that bond. So it's like an interstellar engagement party. In a way, but with more ritual drumming, and possibly clouds that scream. Of course. He followed her through the colony's outer gate into the open plains where the mist thickened and the colors of the world seemed slightly exaggerated, greens that hummed, blues that shimmered like soap bubbles. The Evelyn had constructed an enormous circular space, half natural and half sculpted, with stone spires rising around its edges like frozen lightning. A low rhythmic tone vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. The soil pulsed faintly in time. Lyra guided him toward the center. Traditionally, the one who offered the bloom must now speak the words of intention. Elliot blinked. What words? You will know them when the moment arrives. That's not helpful, Lyra, that's the opposite of helpful. She merely smiled. It must come from your resonance, your inner knowing.